Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're tackling something I think we all want more of, the self-discipline.
Oh, yeah.
We've got a really interesting mix of sources for this one.
Okay.
Some academic research, motivational articles. We've even got a neuroscientist's take on focus and reward.
Cool.
So have you ever wondered what it is, what that real difference is between those super high achievers and everybody else?
Right.
Is it just like pure talent, or could self-control be the kind of the secret ingredient?
Well, that's a question that researchers have actually looked into quite a bit. One of the sources that you sent, the American Scientist article, it talks about the Dunedin study, which followed over 1,000 people
Wow.
for decades. And what's really fascinating is they found that self-control, like when they were kids, was actually a much stronger predictor of success later in life
Oh, wow.
than IQ or even their socioeconomic background.
Interesting.
Yeah, we're talking about success across the board, health, wealth, even staying out of trouble with the law.
That's pretty amazing. Like, it really makes you think about all those little tiny self-control moments we have every day, and what could that mean down the road? But what about happiness?
Right.
Is self-discipline all about restriction,
Yeah.
missing out?
Actually, the studies found that people who had higher self-control also reported greater life satisfaction.
Hmm.
So it seems like it's not so much about deprivation, but rather having the tools to make choices that line up with what we want long term.
Yeah.
Our values, goals, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So it's more like empowerment than restriction.
Yeah, right.
I like that. Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit and talk about how our brains are actually wired for focus and reward.
Okay.
You've got some fascinating stuff here from Dr. Andrew Huberman, a neuroscientist. He was interviewed on the Rich Roll podcast.
Yeah, his work is really groundbreaking.
Yeah.
One of the things that I thought was really interesting was this concept of duration, path, outcome thinking.
Okay.
He basically says to stay motivated, our brains, they need a clear picture of how much effort something's going to take,
Right.
the steps involved, and the desired outcome.
That's
So
all.
it's we need a roadmap for our goals,
Yeah.
not just a vague idea of where we want to end up.
So it's not enough to just dream big.
Right.
You've got to have the plan.
Yeah.
I'm curious, did Dr. Huberman, did he have any personal stories that kind of led him to thinking this way about focus and discipline?
He did, yeah. He talked about how he had kind of a wild youth, like skateboarding, punk rock, that whole thing.
Oh, wow.
But he eventually realized that to reach his goals, academically and with fitness, he really needed to embrace, structure
Yeah.
and focus. So he's like a real life example of how, changing our habits and our mindset can lead to some pretty big transformations.
That's pretty inspiring. It shows that, self-discipline is something you can develop.
Right.
It's not just something you're born with.
Exactly.
But, let's be honest, resisting temptation is not easy. One of the articles, The Power of Self-Control in Achieving Your Goals, really digs into this.
Yeah, absolutely. That article, it really highlights, the importance of delaying gratification and resisting those urges, the immediate urges that can kind of sidetrack us.
Yeah,
It's about realizing that sometimes the best choices
right.
are the ones that require us to kind of skip the instant pleasure
Yeah.
and go for the long-term game.
It's about playing the long game, making those little sacrifices now that'll eventually lead to, bigger things.
Right.
Speaking of pushing limits, another source we have talked about Navy SEAL training.
Oh, yeah.
It's a pretty extreme example of how self-discipline can be crucial,
Mm-hmm.
even life or death.
Yeah, the SEAL example it's really powerful.
Yeah.
It highlights how important mental toughness is.
Right.
The ability to keep going even when things are incredibly intense. They cultivate a level of self-discipline that, most of us will never experience.
Yeah.
But there's a lesson in there for all of us. We all have these inner reserves of strength
Right.
and resilience. And
Yeah.
we can tap into those when we need to.
It's a reminder that we're capable of so much more than we think we are.
Absolutely.
But how do we actually get at those reserves? What are some things we could do to build that self-discipline muscle?
Well, Brian Tracy's book, The Power of Self-Discipline, he offers some great advice. One key takeaway is setting clear goals
Right.
and then consistently taking action towards them.
Yeah.
It sounds simple, but, so many of us get stuck in that planning stage.
Yeah.
Or we let procrastination kind of derail us.
So it's about bridging that gap between intention and action.
Right.
I'm also really curious about the financial advice he gives. You mentioned earlier that the Dundon study links self-control with wealth. And I know Tracy talks a lot about saving money consistently. How does that fit in with the whole self-discipline picture?
It's a really good example of how, like, self-control in one area can impact other areas of our lives.
Yeah.
You know? Think about it. Resisting that impulse buy,
Mm-hmm.
sticking to a budget,
Yeah.
saving consistently. These are all little acts of self-discipline that can lead to, financial freedom,
Right?
less stress. It's about making our everyday choices match our long-term financial goals.
It's about having the discipline to say no to that instant gratification
Mhm.
so you can say yes to, a more abundant, secure future.
Right.
Making those choices, even when they're not easy or exciting.
Absolutely.
But it's not just about, like, white-knuckling our way through cravings, right?
Right.
There's this concept of urge surfing that I thought was interesting.
Yeah, urge surfing, it's a mindfulness thing.
Okay.
It basically means like you observed your cravings without giving into them.
Oh, okay.
So instead of trying to suppress it or ignore it, you write it out
Got it.
like a wave.
Okay.
And you notice the sensations, the thoughts, all that goes with it.
Mhm.
It's about understanding what's going on inside,
Yeah.
and learning how to navigate those urges better.
So it's not about getting rid of the cravings altogether. It's
Right.
about, like, changing your relationship with them.
Exactly.
That leads us to another interesting concept, Parkinson's law, which states that, like, work expands to fill the time you give it.
Right, exactly. This
Yeah.
is so relevant to self-discipline.
Yeah.
If we give ourselves a whole day to do something,
Yeah.
we'll probably take the whole day, right?
Right.
But if we set shorter deadlines,
Yeah.
we often find that we can be way more focused
Yeah.
and get a lot more done.
So it's almost like you're tricking your brain into being more productive by, like, creating this sense of urgency.
Exactly.
It's fascinating how these little tweaks to our mindset and habits can make such a big difference in how much we get done. Okay, so we've laid some groundwork here for understanding self-discipline on a personal level,
Mm-hmm.
but let's zoom out a little bit
Okay.
and look at its impact on society.
Yeah.
Dr. Huberman had some pretty interesting things to say about this.
Yeah, he talked about what he calls a poverty of attention in modern society.
Okay,
He thinks that all the information and stimulation we're exposed to all the time
right.
has actually weakened our ability to focus deeply
Yeah.
and think critically.
Mm-hmm.
And this has some, far-reaching consequences.
That's a kind of scary thought, huh?
Yeah.
Makes you wonder if we're trading our ability to, like, really focus and think deeply
Right.
for just these quick hits of information and entertainment.
Yeah, that instant gratification.
Let's dip into that a little bit more.
Okay.
So before we went off on that tangent, we were talking about Dr. Huberman's concept of a poverty of attention.
Right.
In modern society. Can you unpack that a little bit? What does he mean by that, and why is he so concerned about it?
Well, he basically argues that all the information, the constant stimulation, all the stuff we're bombarded with in this digital age has really kind of broken up our attention
Right.
and made it hard for us to really focus deeply or to think for a long period of time on one thing. It's like our minds are always jumping from one thing to the next and never really landing anywhere for too long.
Yeah, I think we all feel that sense of, like, constant notifications, updates.
Right.
You're just, always tied to your devices, even when you're trying to relax.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the problem he sees. He thinks that this chronic state of distraction, it's eroded our ability to really think critically,
Right.
to solve hard problems, and even to empathize with other people.
He actually links this poverty of attention to the decline in, like, civil discourse,
Yeah.
Like, we've lost the ability to have nuanced conversations or to even consider different viewpoints
Right.
without getting outraged or defensive.
Exactly. He argues that our nervous systems they're just so used to that instant gratification and those heightened emotional state
Right.
that we really struggle with anything ambiguous or complex,
Yeah.
That we're quick to judge, quick to react, slow to really listen.
It's like we're always chasing that next dopamine hit,
Right.
that next outrage.
Yeah.
The next thing is going to grab our attention for just a second.
Uh-huh.
But we're losing something really crucial in the process, that ability to connect deeply,
Yeah.
to think critically, to engage with the world in a meaningful way.
And this has real consequences. He points to things like like the rise of polarization, filter bubbles, misinformation,
Yeah.
all symptoms of this kind of attention deficit. Like we're losing our ability to make sense of things together.
So how do we break free from this cycle of distraction? How do we reclaim our attention?
Well, Dr. Huberman, he suggests that it starts with recognizing the problem and then making a conscious effort to develop better habits.
Okay.
He really emphasizes things like mindfulness and breath work
Hmm.
as ways to kind of train our attention and regulate our nervous systems.
Yeah.
It's about choosing where we focus our attention and learning to resist those impulses,
Mm-hmm.
the urge to check our phones or scroll through social media.
So it's about taking back control of our attention
Right.
instead of letting it be hijacked by all these outside forces.
Exactly. It's about being more intentional with how we engage with technology,
Yeah.
with information.
And he thinks this is something we need to start teaching kids, right?
Oh, absolutely.
From a young age.
Yeah, giving them the tools to navigate this world that's just saturated with distractions.
So equipping future generations with that ability to focus, to think critically, which is going to be so crucial for solving all these complex problems they're going to face.
Exactly.
And it's not just about kids, is it?
No, not at all.
Yeah. I mean, we can all benefit from this stuff.
Absolutely. Whether it's setting aside time for focused work, practicing mindfulness, taking breaks from our devices,
Yeah.
little changes can make a big difference.
It's recognizing that attention is precious, something to cultivate, something to protect, not just squander on all these endless distractions.
Right.
And this idea of attention as a resource, it kind of ties back to what we were talking about earlier with Parkinson's law, that need to set boundaries around our time.
Absolutely. Parkinson's law reminds us that work will expand to fill the time we give it.
Right.
So if we want to reclaim our attention, be more productive, we got to set those boundaries, create structure, prioritize the things that really matter.
And that takes discipline,
Yes.
not just in terms of resisting distractions, but also in making those tough choices about how we use our time and energy,
Right.
aligning our actions with our values, letting go of the things that aren't serving us.
It's about being intentional with our lives, realizing that self-discipline isn't about deprivation. Yeah, it's about creating space for those things that bring us joy, fulfillment, meaning.
And that brings us back to the heart of this deep dive, right?
Mhm.
This power of self-discipline to shape not just our own lives, but the world around us.
Exactly. It's about understanding that the choices we make,
Yeah.
how we manage our attention, our emotions, our behavior, it all ripples outward.
So if we want to create a more mindful, compassionate, engaged society,
Right.
it starts with cultivating those qualities within ourselves.
Well said. It's about recognizing that self-discipline is not just a personal virtue, it's a social responsibility.
This has been a really insightful conversation. I'm already starting to think about how I can apply some of this stuff to my own life.
Me too.
What about you? What's resonating with you most?
I think for me, it's the interconnectedness of it all, how our individual choices around self-discipline can impact, our well-being, our relationships, even the fabric of society.
It's a reminder that we're not just isolated individuals.
Right.
We're all part of this larger ecosystem, and our actions have consequences,
Mm-hmm.
positive and negative.
Yeah.
So before we wrap things out, I want to shift gears slightly and talk about some more practical strategies for building self-discipline.
Okay.
We touched on urge surfing earlier,
Mm-hmm.
but there are so many other techniques out there.
Right.
What are some of your favorites? So we've covered a ton in this deep dive into self-discipline, the science behind it, how it affects society, even some tips for boosting our own willpower.
Yeah. It's been a great conversation.
But I always love hearing about different approaches. What are some other practical strategies people can use to, build more self-control in their daily lives?
One that I really like is the idea of habit stacking. It's basically linking a new habit you want to create with one you already have.
Okay.
Like, say you want to start meditating every morning. You could try tacking it onto your coffee routine.
Oh, I see. So you're not trying to build this whole new routine from scratch. You're just sort of piggybacking on an existing one.
Exactly. It's like creating a mental shortcut so it's easier to stick with it.
Interesting.
And another thing, start small. Don't try to overhaul your whole life all at once.
Right.
Just focus on those little gradual changes that you can keep up over time.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like when you start a new workout program, you don't want to go too hard too fast.
Right.
You got to ease into it.
Exactly. And it's not just about adding new habits.
Okay.
It's also about removing the ones that aren't working for us anymore. Brian Tracy talks about those keystone bad habits, the ones that kind of ripple out and affect other areas of our lives.
So some habits are more impactful than others.
Right. And if you can like tackle those keystone bad habits, it can create a positive chain reaction, improving a bunch of things at once.
Wow. So like if you're struggling with procrastination,
Mm-hmm.
that could be a keystone bad habit that's affecting, your productivity, your stress level, even your self-esteem.
Exactly.
And by working on that one habit, you could unlock a whole bunch of positive changes.
Exactly.
That's really interesting. And it's a reminder that self-discipline isn't just about willpower.
Right.
It's also about, like, strategy,
Mm-hmm.
understanding those patterns in our behavior.
Yeah, and being patient with ourselves. Change takes time, take effort.
Of course.
We're not going to become self-discipline gurus overnight.
Right.
But if we consistently apply these ideas, these techniques,
Yeah.
we can gradually build that self-control and create a life that's really in line with our values and goals.
This deep dive has really changed how I think about self-discipline. For me, one of the biggest things is it's not just about hitting goals or being super productive.
Mm-hmm.
It's about developing this deeper sense of control over our own lives. Like, we have the power to choose.
That's a great way to put it. It's about recognizing we have the power to choose how we react to challenges, how we manage our time, our energy, ultimately how we shape our own destiny.
So, as we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a question. If self-discipline is the key to unlocking our potential, what's one small step you can take today to strengthen your own willpower?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's setting a clear intention for how you'll spend your time,
Right.
or committing to just a few minutes of mindful breathing. Each act of self-discipline, no matter how small, is a step towards a more fulfilling life.
And remember, it's a journey. Be kind to yourself, celebrate those wins along the way, and never underestimate the power of those small, consistent efforts. Those are the things that can lead to amazing changes over time.
Well said. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of self-discipline. We hope you found it insightful and inspiring. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the incredible power within each of us.